Hi, I'm Alex Goldman. This is Hyperfixed. On this show, listeners write in with their problems, big and small, and I solve them. Or at least I try. And if I don't, I at least give a good reason why I can't. So before I introduce you to this week's episode, I want to formally introduce you to Hyperfixed Producer Amor Yates.
Hey, Alex.
So this week, Amor noticed a surprising trend in our problem submission form. Apparently, you all had a lot to say about the state of public restrooms. Amor, can you tell me why public restrooms in particular as a problem intrigued you so much?
Yeah. So we had nearly a dozen public restroom complaints, and I felt compelled to investigate this further, not just because of the sheer number of these bathroom-related questions, which I should also note is more than any other submission we have so far, but also because public restrooms might be the bane of my existence.
I mean, I'm not particularly fond of public restrooms either, but they're also not something I've given a ton of thought to, and it seems like you definitely have. So why do you hate them?
Have you ever seen the 1999 Tarzan animated film by any chance?
No, I've never seen it because I was 20 at that time, and I was like out doing cool stuff. Sorry.
Well, there's a scene in the early years of Tarzan's life where he's swimming in a large pool of water, clandestinely approaching a herd of elephants that are bathing and socializing because he's been dared to grab an elephant hair.
Uh-huh.
So while Tarzan is swimming toward these elephants, there's a smaller elephant skeptically examining this water that all his family seems to be enjoying and chatting in. And he says, "Mom, are you sure this water is sanitary? It looks questionable to me." This is how I feel about public restrooms. They are questionable, and I am not alone in this feeling. So this week, Donny talks about toilets. Obviously, we can't reach out to all of the people that wrote into us, but there was one guy whose complaint with public bathrooms didn't quite encompass all the others, but it came pretty close.
My name is Donny Perry, and I am in my beautiful hometown of Des Moines, Iowa.
This is Donny. He works for a company that produces stationery products, like paper, journals, notebooks, so he thinks about design a lot. And I don't just mean the look of products. When Donny is thinking about design, he's thinking about how products are used by people. And to him, there is perhaps no product more poorly designed than the American public bathroom.
Putting our conversation in context, I'm going to talk about toilets, using toilets, and the three parts of the toilet that I'm concerned with. We'll call it the bowl, the seat, and the cover.
Sounds like his problem is with toilets.
No, Alex, this man has beef with every part of the public bathroom experience. But the physical design of the toilet is definitely at the top of that list. The problem is that Donny pees standing up. And unless he's using a urinal, he has to lift the toilet seat to do this. But Donny hates touching the toilet seat with his hands. He thinks there has to be a better way to do this, and he has a very specific idea of what that should look like.
One time, I was in a great barbecue restaurant in Brooklyn, and I went into the restroom, and all they had was a toilet. There was not a urinal. So I walked up to the toilet, and I was forced to touch the seat. But right next to the toilet was a trash can. That trash can had a lid, but the lid operated with a foot pedal. Super common trash can design. And I thought, why doesn't this toilet seat and this toilet cover operate by foot pedal instead of me having to use my hands, reach down and touch it?
But Donny is so hardcore about this that he thinks there should be a pedal lifting toilet seats in all restrooms, even residential ones. Like if you go to a party at your friend's house, Donny thinks you shouldn't have to use your hands to lift their toilet seat.
I can't imagine that someone hasn't already made a toilet like this.
I don't know if I can say that nobody in the world has made this toilet, but I can say that Donny has been looking for a toilet like this for years, all around the world, and so far he's found nothing.
So I've been to Japan a number of times, and I think we can say with confidence Japan is the world leader in toilet design. In terms of everything that a toilet can do and how it can make you feel, they're runaway leaders. That said, you're still forced to touch Japanese toilets. So the leaders in toilet design have not solved it in the way that I would approve of. What I have seen is attempts to kind of make us feel less gross around toilets, but the attempts, for me, make me feel even worse. And one of the attempts is where the toilet seat is kind of wrapped in this plastic that rotates around into the back of the toilet, like some magical sanitation's happening back there that's supposed to make me okay with touching this. It only makes me feel grosser when I see those toilet seats. I suppose not having a cover on public restrooms is one way, like, hey, that's one less thing you have to touch. But if I'm choosing to use the toilet standing up, then I still have to touch the seat, and that's even grosser in my opinion. And I walk into every bathroom experience just so grossed out and frustrated that we're not addressing this.
Amor, I heard you snickering at him. Are you laughing at poor Donny?
Of course not. But I love that you can just like hear him picturing the bathroom.
Dude, the disgust in his voice, ooh, it just sounds like it touches him to his core. He hates public restrooms more than anyone, except maybe you.
Honestly, though, I totally agree with him. I'm a germaphobe, and I think touching the toilet is disgusting.
So how do you deal with this problem when you have to lift or lower the toilet seat?
I use my foot.
You take your shoe off your foot and you swipe at it with it?
No.
Okay, explain what you do.
When I go to the bathroom and I have to lift the toilet seat cover, I simply use the front bottom part of my shoe to lift it up.
Did you pitch this idea to Donny?
Yes, and his response was hilarious.
Frankly, I don't want the toilet seat touching my shoes either. So yeah, I can use my foot. I can use something other than my hand. I can bring in a tool, I guess, a little hook or a stick, something. But I feel like all of this is just poorly duct taped solutions.
Okay, so this isn't his only issue with the bathroom, right? Like, what are his other issues?
I have two. The first one is, I think this is a common gross out, is public restroom stall design where the door does not fully shut and it leaves the gap of shame as you briefly make eye contact in your most vulnerable position possible with people who are just passing by. That is one thing. The other thing that really grosses me out is when public restrooms do not have sound. All public restrooms should have sound. This is where people go to, of course, use the toilet and all the sounds that come with that. But then this is where you're like blowing your nose. This is where you're coughing. This is where, in worst case scenario, you might need to vomit, right? Soundscape design is so important in the bathroom to me. And I walk into so many restrooms where it's just not even considered. There is no sound. It's just a tiled echo chamber where you hear everything your fellow bathroom users are doing magnified over and over again, just bouncing off the walls.
Okay, so I can relate to that. When I worked at Gimlet, which was a podcast production company, they did a great job of soundproofing the entire floor of the building we were in. And the net result was when you went into the bathroom, it was like completely silent. Like you could hear everything everyone was doing, every rustle of their clothes. So they had to start piping music in so that you couldn't hear everything everyone else was doing.
Oh, do you remember who spearheaded that effort?
I don't, but whoever did was a visionary. But I think that whoever did also did so because all of us were like, this has to stop. Like, I can't use the bathroom in peace.
It's hard to go when it's that quiet.
Okay, so that's it? That's like all Donny has to complain about?
Hold on. Third one, none of the motion sensors at the sinks work. None of them work.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that one too. It's especially difficult for my daughter to somehow get her hands under that thing and actually make it go. But like, okay, so you're obviously not going to redesign the toilets in all of the public restrooms in America. How are we going to hyperfix this problem?
No. And Donny knows that. But for our purposes, he kind of just wanted to know why all of these things haven't already been redesigned, you know? And this was more or less the theme of all the restroom submissions we received. People wanting to know why are public restrooms so shitty? Like, if we know toilet seats are covered in germs, why haven't we developed a sanitary way to lift them?
Yeah, and why is there that little gap where people can see everything you're doing?
Exactly. So I did that thing we do. I went looking for the person who wrote the definitive book on public restrooms.
And based on the fact that we are talking right now, I am assuming you found that person?
Well, I found the guy who edited the book on public restrooms.
Which is called Toilet, by the way. Nothing subtle about that.
This is Harvey Mollich. He's a professor emeritus of sociology at both NYU and UC Santa Barbara. And among other things, Harvey researches public restrooms.
And we did that deliberately because we wanted to get away from the shyness. To, call it what it is. It is a goddamn toilet.
So this book is a collection of essays that examines the sociology and psychology of public restrooms. And one of the things that's so fascinating about it is that over and over again, you see these writers arguing that the problems we have with the design of American restrooms are actually design choices. And if you look closely at them, you can learn a lot about our cultural attitudes on everything from gender to class to disability.
Okay, that's a lot. Can you give me some examples?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, I asked Harvey, very broadly, why are public restrooms designed the way that they are? Everyone agrees they are uncomfortable and icky. So who is continuing to design them this way and why? And his answer was fascinating.
I've been involved in working with architects in public buildings, particularly NYU and UCSB, but also in London. I've worked with the major architects of the world on big projects that are, in fact, adequately funded in most cases. The design of the restroom is given to the lowest ranking member of the design team.
What? That seems crazy.
I know. So what ends up happening is that when the building specs are being negotiated, let's say for a university building, they start with a blueprint where every room is allotted a specific amount of space and money. But then we get a science teacher who looks at this plan and says, no, my lab needs to be expanded. Well, obviously that room is going to cost more money, so the additional budget and space gets pulled from, say, the commissary. But then the commissary designers are getting distressed about their vision, and so they pull from some other part of the building. And on it goes like that, until there's one designer who has to furnish their room on a shoestring.
Ah, the poor schmuck with the bathroom.
And that's why in the United States, you go into any of these buildings and the entry hall is brilliantly lit. The floors are marble. The carpets are chosen with care. But the restroom, it's like you call Home Depot and they send the same crap to every restroom.
Okay, so bathrooms are obviously the last priority. But you were also saying that, like, the design choices reflect cultural attitudes in some way.
Yes. You remember Donny's thing about the gap of shame?
Oh, yes. And I remember thinking, like, isn't that just a function of the door having to open on a hinge?
That's what I thought too. But Alex, according to Harvey, this is an intentional part of American bathroom design. And the reason behind it is pretty disgusting.
You can walk into an American restroom and you can look between the cracks, between the door and the wall, and you can see what someone's doing, including, and by the way, this then becomes American prudery, whether or not they're masturbating. And that has been a big deal, to be able to see whether people are masturbating on their own or having sex with another human being.
Why the fuck would anybody care? That's the last thing I want to see. Listen, if people are doing that in a public restroom, I'm not happy about it, but like, I would like there to be less of a gap so I don't have to interact with that in any way. But it also does make sense, seeing as how prudish and sort of weird about sex Americans are. I get it. It sucks, though.
And so to ward off this possibility and discourage people from doing that, it means that no one actually has privacy. We do that in the United States. All over Europe, in Britain, wherever you go, the restroom stalls are floor to ceiling or close to it. So there's America. you can see America. Right when you're looking through that crack, or worse, someone's looking at that crack through you, they are seeing America.
Damn, that's like a pretty savage indictment of like American cultural social mores as a whole. This dude's brutal.
And I didn't even prompt him for that question. We were just talking about what's up with American bathrooms, and he happened to mention this almost offhandedly. Harvey didn't really have an answer to the issue of the motion-activated sinks or Donny's toilet pedal problem. Those are more scientific and technical problems. He's more of a sociologist than a design specialist. But generally speaking, he told me that if there's something you don't like about public bathrooms, start talking about it.
Talk about it where you work, where you go to school, whatever. Talk about it. Where you go to a concert. Take over, ladies of the world, unite.
He said this because I was complaining about the fact that women's restroom lines are almost always at least twice as long as men's.
And by the way, I hang around in some very progressive, advanced towns and cities. I'm still struck that women don't go. They don't go into the men's rooms and take it over. In the 60s, and I'm old enough to have been alive then, there was an era in which people were doing it with gusto, in fact, and laughter and fun. So do it with fun, if that's your thing, and enter. That's a radical move. Enter in. You have a need, fill it.
What a little cutie that guy is. Did he tell you anything else?
Oh, yeah. So right before we got off, he was like, by the way, have you spoken to the American Restroom Association?
The American Restroom Association. Of course there's a public advocacy group for better public restrooms. Why didn't I think about that?
The American Restroom Association is this organization that advocates for clean, safe, and well-designed bathrooms in the United States. But they do a lot of policy work as well. So we called up the co-founder and treasurer of ARA. His name is Stephen Soifer. And we told Stephen about Donny's foot pedal toilet design. And immediately he was like, oh yeah, I've seen that.
Well, believe it or not, certainly during COVID, that was something that was implemented in some public bathrooms.
Oh my God, it exists.
Yes! The idea was that if COVID is spreading through people touching surfaces in shared spaces, then we need to create ways for them to exist in these spaces without touching stuff. In fact, Stephen said there were some public bathrooms that had been given a whole foot pedal overhaul.
Yeah, they're a foot pedal. And same with like opening the public bathroom doors. And you still see them, every now and then. And it's pretty easy to do. I've seen some designs for the pedals.
I can't believe that such a thing exists.
Clearly there aren't a lot of these, but Donny's dream restroom is out there.
Which is great, but it makes me curious now why this foot pedal design isn't more prevalent. How expensive could it possibly be to implement?
Actually, they're super cheap. Stephen estimates you could probably mass manufacture them for $50 at most. But it just goes back to that thing that Harvey told us. When designing a building or choosing what to update, the bathroom is always the lowest priority. And unless a change to the restroom is required by law, there are very few businesses that will choose to update their restrooms.
So, Amor, I have to confess that I think that the whole fixation with toilet seats is kind of silly because I'm not convinced that they are nearly as gross as you think they are. Which, if you're in the audience and you think that makes me nasty, I apologize. But I just don't have the same kind of association that you guys do. But finding out from Stephen that it would be so inexpensive to put these foot switches on every toilet everywhere, that's even sillier because these are rooms that everyone is using.
Do you want to hear something else that's silly?
Ooh, nice segue.
So you remember Donny's other problem about the motion-censored sinks and why they never work?
Someone explained to me what the problem was with those sensors. They're highly sensitive. So depending on how they're set, they will either go off easily or not go off at all. So, yeah, I think the technology is simply not good. And I do remember someone telling me that they constantly have to come in and adjust these sensors both on the sinks and the toilets And then if it's adjusted wrong, well, voila, you slightest movement on the toilet, it's going to go off.
So it sounds like the motion sensors just have a hard time computing all the movement in a crowded public bathroom. Like, what exactly is someone waving their hand in front of the sink sensor versus what's just dripping from a leaky faucet?
Okay, yeah, those things are terrible. Where do you even begin this fight? I mean, we both live in the New York area. I live in New Jersey, but spend a lot of time in the city. Do we just go to the city of New York and say, hey, you've got to fix the bathrooms?
No. According to Stephen, the person to go to is the building inspector, because the building inspector is responsible for enforcing the building codes. The problem is that there are nowhere near enough building inspectors.
In Hyde Park, I think there's one full-time building inspector and a half-time building inspector. And they're going around inspecting buildings. Like, they are so busy and there's so many things they need to do that where is the list, where on the list of issues does public complaints about toilets come? I'd say pretty close to the bottom.
Okay, so this is obviously a thing that's important enough to our listeners that we've gotten like a dozen messages about it. And I don't think we've gotten a dozen messages about anything else. But it doesn't seem like there's any real mechanism for change at the moment.
There isn't a good mechanism or a fast one, but Stephen says people are making changes.
Even if we start at the building inspector level, then we move up. So I know of groups, there's several groups across the country, believe it or not, toilet advocacy groups in New York City, in Washington, D.C., in Portland, Oregon, and they actually have gone to the city council and demanded more toilets. And I'm saying this for a reason. In New York City, there was a group that helped get the city council to pass legislation to require, get a load of this, at least one public restroom in every zip code area of the city. There's lots of changes that are happening, but they're infrequent, they're at the local level, and hopefully, before I die, we'll actually have a public toilet movement in this country.
After the break, if this show is actually going to start a public toilet movement in this country, I think we have to know what needs a change in. So, I set out to learn what about public restrooms is actually bad for us. Welcome back to the show. So before the break, we met this guy named Donny, who seemed to speak for a lot of our listeners when he told us that he thinks shared toilets are absolutely disgusting. He had a bunch of questions about public restrooms, why they are the way they are, and we answered them one by one. But there was one very important question that Donny didn't ask, and to me, it seemed like most of these other bathroom-related questions were predicated on the answer to that one missing question, which is this. Are public bathrooms really that gross? Now, I understand that, to a certain extent, gross is in the eye of the beholder. For example, some people think it's gross not to wash your legs. Other people think it's gross to sit down in the shower, even if it's your own shower. I've already been through this. I'm not getting into this again. But I wanted to talk to someone who could tell me on like a real microbial level if touching the toilet seat in a public restroom is actually any grosser or more dangerous than touching any surface in the New York City subway. So I called this guy.
My name is Jason Tetro. That's Tango Echo Tango Romeo Oscar, if you happen to be phonetically inclined. And what I do for the last, it's getting close to 40 years now, has been working on understanding those little invisible creatures called microbes.
Jason is a professor at the University of Ottawa. And in those 40 years as a microbiologist, studying things like bacteria, viruses, and other germs, he has only infected himself once.
That was just a very bad situation where I was working on something and someone got my attention while I should have been focused on what I was working with. And yeah, it was pretty bad.
I figured if anybody could say definitively just how gross a toilet seat was, it would be Jason. So I asked him.
Well, first off, have you ever seen over the last, I'd say 10 years, your cell phone is germier than a toilet seat?
Oh yeah, plenty of those.
Or your door handles are germier than a toilet seat? Well, it's actually true. Believe it or not, the toilet seat is probably one of the least contaminated environments or surfaces that you're going to encounter in a restroom.
Jason said that it's actually pretty hard to catch germs from sitting on a toilet seat because in order for something to make you sick, it actually has to get inside of you.
By putting your skin, fully intact skin, onto a surface, a fully intact surface, there's no possible way for a portal of entry to be essentially engaged or invaded. So there's no risk of getting an infection from a toilet seat in that sense. Now, if you have cuts on your gluteus and you sit on a toilet seat, then yes, the potential for Staphylococcus aureus to get in there or Pseudomonas aeruginosa to get in there and cause a wound infection is possible. So you can never say it's impossible. But the likelihood for anyone to catch anything from a toilet seat is minimal to almost negligible.
Not only is it hard to catch anything from a toilet seat, Jason says that they are actually relatively clean compared to the rest of the restroom.
The ones that are actually the most contaminated happens to be the hand dryer and the soap dispenser.
Why the hand dryer?
Because at the end of the day, you're supposed to wash your hands a certain way. You're supposed to get your hands wet, put some soap in there, keep rubbing for anywhere from 20 to 40 seconds, or as I like to say, you say the alphabet backwards or sing happy birthday twice.
Right.
But the problem is that most people don't do that. They do the little tinkle thing with their fingers or something along those lines. Or if you've ever watched Seinfeld, you do what Poppy does, which is you play with your hair. And then they hit the hand dryer. And then before you know it, you're covering that hand dryer and whatever happens to be on your hands. And that is the biggest problem of all. So the hand dryer and the soap dispenser, obviously the soap dispenser, are going to be the germiest places.
So the two places which people go to clean themselves are generally the grossest.
Yep, pretty much.
Do we have any good information about like how much better like hygiene in the world would be if people wash their hands properly? Like how much less likely we would be to have flu seasons and things like that? Or is it mostly just guessing?
83%.
83?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
83% of the population do not wash their hands properly. That's basically what we found. So the fact is that if you were washing your hands properly, that 83% would disappear. So yeah, hands are responsible for pretty much everything that we've been seeing.
So the problem is not the unknown human matter that coats the sticky restroom floors, which like I don't want to minimize. That is really gross. But the real thing that's making us sick is us. It's less about public restroom design and more on us to use better hygiene in public restrooms.
You know what you really should be scared of, though, is that you should actually think about it from this perspective. How many people would you imagine have probably done a courtesy flush?
So a courtesy flush means something different to everyone, I guess, depending on what you find courteous. But what Jason's talking about is when you flush the toilet halfway through doing your business to get rid of some of the smell for other people in the bathroom. Jason says that by being courteous to others, you are actually putting yourself at risk.
You have several openings down there, and one of them is for out, and the other one is for out, but sometimes the droplets will get in, and it will lead to that urinary tract getting contaminated.
So what you end up with is a pretty gnarly urinary tract infection. What parts of restroom design are making sanitation worse? Like, it can't just be people's bad habits. They must be baked in some way to the way that restrooms are designed.
Yeah, and I've actually worked with companies on this in the past, trying to figure out what is the best approach to be able to reduce the likelihood of any kind of infection transfer or infectious microbe transfer. And there are a couple of options. One, and it's very simple, add lids. It's just, if you have a lid, then you're not going to have aerosolization of the plume. And as a result of that, you're not going to have the contamination of the environment.
As much as Donny hates having to touch the toilet, a toilet seat lid is actually his best protection from some of the most harmful elements of a public restroom. Jason tells me that any germs you might come in contact with on the toilet seat are nothing compared to the world of gross that is coming out of them in the form of toilet plume aerosols. So, when you flush a toilet, the current of water forms a tidal wave of molecules that project toilet particles into the air as far as 6 feet away. I mean, we heard a lot about this during COVID, right? Where we all became way too aware of the risks of airborne illnesses. So shutting the lid before flushing, that is huge. Before we close the lid on this conversation, I wanted to ask Jason, a person who thinks about germs a lot, what he does to protect himself from germs in the restroom. And this is what he said.
So the first thing that I do is when I get into a restroom, I kind of do, both an eye check and a smell check. The eye check is really to find out whether or not things are touchless, and then the smell test to find out whether or not there's been any kind of deposition that sort of has led to aerosols in the air. Because if you can smell it, then there's a very good likelihood that there was probably droplets that came with that have been plumed out. I like to essentially hold my breath a lot. And then when I'm done, depending on what it is, if it's just sort of a handle toilet, then I'll use my foot. And if it's one of these infrared ones where they actually detect motion, then as soon as I stand up, I'm holding my breath because there's going to be a plume because it's going to flush. Once I've done that, then I go to the sink, and then hopefully it's touchless. But if it's not, then what I do is I essentially make sure that I have a lot of soap so that when I'm washing my hands, I can try and, avoid anything that may have been picked up from the taps. And then hopefully I can use the back of my hand or my wrist or my elbow to close the taps and also to hit the hand dryer. And if it's paper towel, then I just grab the paper towel and I use the paper towel to open the door if I can use it. Otherwise, I'll open the door with my pinky, and then I'll use hand sanitizer when I'm out. I mean, it sounds really crazy. It sounds almost like something that the Army maneuvers would do. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like how I do everything from a risk assessment perspective to try and keep myself safe.
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to do even half of that. But I am convinced that Amor and Donny and all of the people who wrote into this show, they're definitely onto something. The public restroom is gross. And we're gross. Like, people are gross. So I guess we're sort of made for each other. I mean, that's not the lesson. But yeah, do what makes you comfortable. Wash your damn hands. Close the lid when you flush. And I guess if you really want to, you can hold your breath the whole time.
There's so much knowledge that I want to share. And so much of it is gross. And it's just like, for me, I become used to it. I become used to seeing microbes around. I know how to protect myself. I know how to stay safe. Like, it's no longer an issue for me. But then I think about it from other people's perspective who don't know what I know. And I actually don't feel bad for myself. I feel bad for them. Because I know I'm not going to get infected, but I can't say the same thing for them. So it's kind of more like an empathy thing. I'm like a Beta Z instead of Spock.
This episode of Hyperfixed was hosted by Amor Yates, who goes through an entire container of hand soap every 4 days, and me, Alex Goldman, who will literally just crap anywhere. Hyperfixed was produced by Amor Yates and two self-described dirty girls, Emma Cortland and Sari Soffer-Sukenik. It was edited by Emma Cortland, Sari Soffer-Sukenik, and Amor Yates. The music is by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder, who may or may not have a butt. It was engineered by Tony Williams, who uses a warm bidet. Fact-checking by Sona Avakian. You can get bonus episodes, join our Discord, and much more at hyperfixedpod.com/join. And if you want your very own diarrhea button from the Casey Wants to Believe episode, seems appropriate to plug that right now, you can get it at hyperfixedpod.com/button. Also, this show can't exist without problems to solve, so head on over to hyperfixedpod.com to submit your problems. Hyperfixed is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX, a network of independent, creator-owned, listener-supported podcasts. Discover audio with vision at radiotopia.fm. Thanks for listening. See you soon.
Radiotopia.